I think I need to synchronize my watch with the box up there. I'm up here earlier than them, but our writers are here, so we will be starting our session.
Tears or security guards, आपको नजदीकी
Can you the session, A Space for Liberty, face to face with Leïla Slimani. So we have on stage Leïla Slimani, Nicolas Idier, and Amitava Kumar. So let's welcome them on stage for a session on Space for Liberty, face to face with Leïla Slimani.
You want to test it or something? Let's take a selfie.
It's done.
Will they tell us when to start or should we just start? Good afternoon. Sorry for the confusion. Leïla was supposed to arrive a little early and then the flight was delayed. We are very happy that she's here and that you are here. My name is Amitava Kumar, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to this conversation with Leïla, whose book, The Perfect Nanny, is all the rage. This week, this month, this year. I certainly thought it was a very electrifying book, touching on dark, deep themes, but at the same time moving propulsively. Very easy to read and very difficult to stop reading. So everyone should go out and buy it, and she'll be signing books after this session. Okay. Leïla, the novel Beloved by Toni Morrison, which won the Nobel Prize, etc., came out because, was written because she read a little news item from 1856 about a woman, a slave, who had killed her child instead of letting her go back to the plantation. And I was wondering, your own story, which is also very harrowing in this latest book, if it too had its beginnings in something you came across or something you heard about, how did the project come to you?
Hello, do you hear me? At the beginning, I wanted just to write a book about a nanny, because I found that a nanny was a very interesting character for a novel, because she has a very ambiguous place in the house, a very ambiguous relationship with the mother and with the children. And I was 30 years old, and I just had my son, and I decided to hire a nanny. So in Saturday afternoon, I decided to meet some nannies. And I met women who came from all over the world, from Philippines, from Africa, from Maghreb. I was 30 years old, and I was feeling very, very young and very unexperimented. And I was meeting those women who sometimes had 2 or 3 children, who had had a very difficult life. And I was like, I'm going to be the boss of this woman, and it felt very weird. And I wanted to hear their stories. Actually, I didn't do a real interview. I was like, who are you? Okay, tell me about you, because I wanted to know who they are. Because I had the feeling they were invisible. They were indispensable for us. I really needed her to have the life I wanted to have. Yes, yes.
Yeah. Welcome again.
Thank you.
One of the interesting things I found, which has a connection to India, is that the nanny's name is Louise. And the name of the nanny who was accused of killing the two children, the British nanny,
Louise Woodward.
Louise Woodward.
That's why her name is Louise. This is because of Louise Woodward, because I was very shocked. During the trial of Louise Woodward, the lawyer of Louise Woodward decided to attack the mother. And he said to the mother, if you didn't want something to happen to your child, you should have taken care of your child yourself. Your child is dead because you're a working mother. And I found this so cruel and so unfair, that's why I wanted to call her Louise, so people can remind of this story, very cruel story. And there is another link with India. It's Kipling at the beginning of the book.
Yes. We only invite at Jaipur Literature Festival those writers who have any link to India. Tell me this though. It is not simply that you are contesting in some ways the cruelty that you found reflected in that judgment. You are also casting a very compassionate eye, not just on the mother, but also on the nanny. There's a lot of sympathy for every character. And I thought it was especially striking that you were alert to the idea that it was migrants who often supply the workforce, except that you did choose to make the nanny white. Can you explain that a little bit?
First of all, for the empathy, I think it's the aim of literature. It's to tell the story even of monsters, even of evil people. Literature is a very particular place for me, a place where we stop judging. It's a place where we make pause on our judgment, and we try just to understand who someone is, what he is feeling. We're not just saying he's good or he's bad. It's not a trial. It's literature. It's a novel. So for me, we have to feel a sort of empathy for Louise. And in France there is a very famous lawyer. She's a female lawyer, and she decided to take the defense of a very famous serial killer. And when she did, everyone, especially the journalists, were very hard on her, telling her, how you, a woman, can you defend a man who raped women and killed women? And she said, I'm not going to say to the court that he's not guilty. He is. I'm just going to tell his story, because even monsters have a story. And for me, that's exactly the resume of literature. Even monsters has a story. And that's what I want to do with my novels. And for the race question, for me, it would have been very easy to choose a sort of cliche, to choose to have a black nanny coming from Africa, and to have an employer, a boss, who is white and very successful. But first of all, I wanted to say that reality is much more complex than what we used to hear in the media, on the TV, and that sometimes immigrants are successful and have money, and sometimes white people are not successful and can be nanny and work for immigrants.
Sure.
Because I think that one of the other aim of literature is to say you have to look at reality with a more complex eye. You have to stop thinking that every cliche is true and that all black women are going to be nannies. And
that's right.
so it was a
conscious choice.
Yes, and it was ironic in a certain way.
I apologize for the echo you are hearing. I've been remiss in not informing you that Leïla's book, The Perfect Nanny, was awarded the Goncourt Prize. And if rumors are to be believed, President Macron has appealed to you repeatedly to be made the Minister of Culture. Is that true?
In a certain way.
And you are a representative of some sort, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Can you, I should have done my research, but I hate looking at Wikipedia. Can't you tell me a little bit about, there is a certain, you have an official position, or you are an ambassador of something, of a culture?
Yes, I'm not an ambassador of a country, I'm an ambassador of a language.
Of a language, yeah.
I'm the ambassador of French language, that's why I'm speaking English with you now. But yes, I try to share with all the people I meet my passion and my love for this language that is extraordinary, and it's one of the only language with English that is spoken in the five continents, all over the world, in Africa, in America, maybe in India, everywhere.
Yes.
And that's my job.
Yeah. Okay, do you want to shut this off?
I think it's working.
Oui, c'est mieux. Ah, voilà.
Also present on the panel is Nicolas Idier. He is himself a novelist. He's written several novels. And because he's a diplomat, he has enough time to write novels.
That's not true.
It is the writing that allows him to be a diplomat, he said earlier. Is that true?
No, that's not true. It's, I think diplomacy and writing can go together pretty well. And I think when I'm reading Leïla's book and when I'm listening at Leïla, I'm very struck by the idea that fiction writers can really add something to our reality. In a way, there is no better diplomat than a writer. And she's a perfect example of that. Now, as an ambassador of French language, first, you're a fiction writer, you're writing novels, you're creating your own reality, but through this reality, you're creating also a space for liberty, a space, in a way, for thinking democracy, for giving visibility to what is not visible. And I think there is many connections between diplomacy, which is the art of creating a relationship, and writing, which is, exactly like Leïla just said, a kind of empathy. You're creating a relationship with someone you don't know, your reader, but it's the same. It's creating a relationship.
All right, thank you, thank you. I think I was prejudiced because in India I see many civil servants committing the sin of literature. And you think, oh, if they stop, that would be great. But that's my prejudice. Nicolas, do you want to tell folks, are you familiar with Leïla's first book? Because Leïla's first book, which also received good notices and prizes, is called In the Ogre's Garden in English. What would be the French title?
Dans le jardin de l'ogre.
All right. So I'm going back to Leïla's last remark about how she wanted to resist cliches and therefore did not want necessarily a black nanny and not go for the most predictable narrative. In the first novel, you also did not immediately go towards writing a familiar narrative about, you know, Morocco that you knew or anything. Instead, it was about sex addiction. And that too, do you mind talking a little bit about what was the initial charge for that? What started you on that? And then we'll go further.
You know, I knew exactly what people were expecting from me. They wanted me to write a novel about Morocco, Islam, veil, suffering, blood, honor, and camels, maybe, and desert or whatever. And I absolutely didn't want to write about this because I'm not interested in this. And I also think there is something very striking, I think. When you speak to a French writer or an American writer, no one is surprised that he wants to write a psychological novel. But when you are a Moroccan writer or a Russian writer or an Indian writer, people want you to write about your country, about identity, about those kind of things. And I think we should claim our liberty to write psychological novels, to write novels about intimacy, that we don't have the obligation to speak about identity. I don't want to be a prisoner of this kind of thing. So that's why I decided to write about sex addiction. And I also wanted to write about a different kind of female character, not a lover, not a mistress, not a mother or a super mother, a woman who was suffering in her flesh, in her heart, in her soul, suffering of addiction, sex addiction. So for me it was a sort of Madame Bovary, but contemporary Madame Bovary. She's very bored. You know, I have a friend who told me, you know, now I have a job, I'm married, I have 2 children, and now what am I going to do? She was like,
now I just have to live with this, and I'm bored, and maybe I will never feel desire again. So I began with this sentence, and now what is going to happen to me?
Would you say that in some ways women's desire has not been written about perhaps as much when people talk about such things? And again in this book, you're representing, you know, two women, one the mother and the other one the nanny, most powerfully. So at least that is the one way in which you do enter the space of creation and writing, thinking about what is marginal. Is that something you think about? Or?
Yes, of course. You know, I think that woman desire has been, men mostly wrote about woman desire, but I'm not sure that they understood everything about woman desire. Even I was talking about Madame Bovary. Madame Bovary is it's an extraordinary book about a woman character, but I'm sure that a woman writer can add something. And I really wanted to give a sort of a testimony. How is it to be a woman today? How is it to own the body of a woman today? How is it to be a mother in a world where you can also be a worker, a wife, a divorcee, an homosexual? How is it when now we are the first generation of women to whom we said, you can have it all? So I just wanted to try to question this. Can we have it all? Can we really be this woman that everyone is claiming we can be?
Yeah. I was wondering, you remember that little section when the nanny's friend is getting married? And there's a little phrase about people speaking too close to the microphone. Do you remember that? I'm remembering that. I don't think the fault is in mine, is mine though. I'm sorry about the sound, guys. One of the attractions of this wonderfully mobile novel is that you pay attention to everyone's point of view. We are sometimes looking over Louise's shoulder, sometimes we are looking over Miriam's shoulder. But then, sorry to sound like an English professor, what I also like is that within a sentence or a passage, the energies shift and reverse. It's always very active, the movement. And to make what I'm describing concrete, I'm going to ask Nicolas to do the job of reading a few paragraphs. Is that all right? When Mila allows, and then on to the next page.
When Mila allows Louise to kiss her, it is so she can smell the talcum powder on her cheeks, so she can get a closer look at the glitter that sparkles on her eyelids. She likes to watch her put lipstick on. With one hand, Louise holds a mirror, always perfectly clean, in front of her, while she pulls her face into a strange grimace that Mila tries to reproduce afterwards in the bathroom. Louise rummaged around in her vanity case. She holds the little girl's hands and coats them with rose scent and cream, which she takes from a teeny pot. Smells nice, doesn't it? Under the child's astonished eyes, Louise puts varnish on her little nails, a vulgar pink varnish that smells like very strongly of acetone. For Mila, this is a smell of femininity. Take off your socks, would you? And she paints the toenail of her chummy little feet with nail varnish. Louise empties out the contents of the vanity case on the table. The air fills with orange dust and the smell of talc. Mila laughs suddenly, jubilantly. Louise is putting lipsticks on now, then blue eyeshadow, then a sort of orange paste on her cheeks. She asks her to lower her head, and she backcombs her hair, too straight and too fine, until she looks like a mane.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Especially those, the Indian audience members are familiar with the case, the Arushi Talwar case. And what happened in this was that a young woman was found dead by her parents. And then everyone around them quickly assumed that it was the servant who had killed her. Till a day or two later, they found the servant's decomposed body upstairs. He had also been killed. And for the longest time, it was believed, at least by some people, that it was the parents who had killed, but recently they were acquitted. I thought the reason why that story gripped the people so much was not simply because of a sense of injustice or justice miscarried, but because it did touch upon a grave middle-class fear that people have that their servants or drivers will kill them. And that's a problematic fear, but it is a deeply shared fear. Do you think your novel also, in some ways, draws upon that or touches upon that fear? Can you talk a little bit about that? Or different kinds of fears, yeah.
It is a book about fear. First of all, it is a book about a very primal fear, the nightmare that everyone can understand all over the world, the nightmare of losing your child. Every woman, every father can understand what is it. You know, I remember that the first time I saw my child, I think that the first feeling that I had was love, of course, but it was not only love, it was fear. I looked at the baby and I was like, I'm not alone anymore, and something can happen to him. And he needs me so much. Without me, he's going to die. And I had this fear, this anxiety, and when I began to write the book, I knew that I had to explore this fear, that I had to go very, very deep into my nightmares and try not to avoid it, but to, in a certain way, confront my own fears. And the other fear is a sort of a social fear, living in the same home with someone who doesn't belong to your world, someone who is from another class, someone who has another way of life, another culture. You know, I was born and raised in Morocco, and in Morocco it's very usual to have a nanny living at home and sleeping at home. And I remember when I was a little girl that it was very weird for me because I could understand that my nanny didn't belong to our world, but at the same time she was like my mother. So this ambiguity between my feelings that were very deep towards her and the fact that she was a stranger, that she was someone who couldn't read, who couldn't write, who belonged to a complete different world, it was very interesting. So the domesticity, it's this idea, someone coming from abroad, coming from another world, is going to live with you. It's the stranger. It's exactly like the immigrants coming to the country. You're afraid of him, but at the same time you want to be nice with him. So I wanted to explore this ambiguity.
You spoke about your childhood in Morocco. Can you talk a little bit more about your background? Did you grow in a literary family or?
So I was born in Rabat, and my mother was a doctor. She belongs to one of the first generation of women who were doctors. So she was a surgeon, and my father was a banker. So I belong to the bourgeoisie from Morocco, and my father was a minister of finance of Morocco. And I have two sisters, and I was in a family where writers were very important. My two parents were absolutely fascinated by writers. The best life in the world for my parents was to be writers. So when I was a little girl, I believed that being a writer supposed to be always drugged and have a lot of passion and sex, and then I discovered it's not like this at all. But my parents were absolutely fascinated by the life of writers. It was so nice. And my mother always told me, you're going to be a writer. And I don't know if I'm a writer because I'm a very good girl and I always do what my mother tell me to do, or if she was right. I don't know.
I'd love to know a little bit more about how you arrived at your aesthetic, particularly your style, which I find short, quick sentences bare, but only in the sense that they don't seem ornamental or adorned, but at the same time, they have a unique power. Who are your touchstones, and how do you arrive at your style? And
Before you spoke about point of views and this idea of action. For me, it's very important because I think that you never know someone. You know someone always through the eyes of someone or through the action that this person is doing. So I'm not a psychological writer. I don't like to write a lot about psychology. I write a lot about action. I think that a reader is very intelligent. I trust the reader a lot. I don't want to explain everything. I think that what you don't write is almost as important as what you write. So I try to show to the reader what my characters are doing. I'm not trying to explain why they are doing what they are doing. So I love clarity. Because, you know, I think that when you write about very ambiguous feelings, very ambiguous situation, when the morality of the story is not very clear, you have to be very clear when you write. I think that the situation is ambiguous, but the writing must be very clear if you want the situation to be ambiguous.
That's very well put. Nicholas, I'll go on asking questions, but if you have any question for Leïla, you should also jump in. What is the writing culture like in France? You know, I teach in the United States. All my students who are in my writing classes want to go and do MFAs, you know, which is a degree in writing. And there are students here too in India. There have been 1 or 2 institutions that have started doing it. Did you have something like that, or, yeah?
You know, in France, we have this idea that you can't learn to write, that you are born a writer or you're not a writer. That's just nature in a certain way. And for us, I think that for a lot of French, it's very weird when we hear about the writing classes, writing in the United States. There's a sort of a condescendence towards this learning to write. How can you do this? If you have a novel inside you, it's going to get out one day or another. So no, I never had this kind of classes, but I wrote out for years, and I wrote very bad novels, very boring, and I had a lot of editors who told me that it was bullshit, sorry, but that's why they told me. And
I have to interrupt you. Here we say, pardon my French.
Pardon my French, yeah, pardon my English. And you know, the day I received the Prix Goncourt, I know it's stupid, but I sent my novel to one of the editors who refused 3 of my novel, and I was very pleased.
I think in India we now have 80 to 90 literary festivals, and that has become to replace what an idea of an MFA is. I think we come here to learn writing. I think so. Tell me another thing. Your novel is rather short, you know, and it belongs to the categories of best novellas, in my opinion. Is there an attraction of the novella form as opposed to the novel form? Not that big baggy monster, but were you going for something pithy and quick?
You know, I don't really think it was a choice. It came like this. I have to be honest, I'm not sure now that I have the ability to write like a very big novel. I hope I will one day write my Tolstoy novel, but I don't think that today I have the strength to do it. It's the best I can do. I'm sorry.
It's a wonderful novel. I think I'm going to teach it. I'm teaching a course called The World in Short this semester, only novellas from other parts of the world. I'm going to use it. I also know, though I have not read it, that you have a recent book coming out, or it has just come out, which is a work of nonfiction. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about it?
This is a book called Sex and Lies. It's a book about Morocco, the sexual life of women in Morocco. Because when I wrote my first novel, I went to Morocco to present the book, and I did presentation like today. And one day after a presentation, I went to a cafe. I had a cafe and a cigarette, and a woman sat next to me. And she said, oh, yeah, I read your book, and I want to tell you my story. And she told me her story, but with a lot of details. It was very intimate. She told me a lot of secrets that I'm sure she have maybe never told anyone. And you know, in Morocco, women don't have the right to have a sexual life before marriage. It's forbidden by the law. You can go to prison if you lose your virginity before marriage. Homosexuality is forbidden. And adulterous, cheating on your husband or on your wife, adultery. Adultery is forbidden too. You can go to prison, but it's mostly women who go to prison. And so I decided to try to understand how women in Morocco today can live with these laws, how they manage to have a sexual life, to have an intimacy, to have lovers. So I decided to share these testimonies of many women coming from different social class, religious women, non-religious women, old, young, every kind of women.
That's amazing. Nicholas, can I ask you a question about language? You know, Leïla's latest book is called Lullaby in the UK, published by Faber, but in the US, it is called The Perfect Nanny. Since this is a democracy, let's do a little exercise in voting. How many people think The Perfect Nanny is a better title? Can you raise your hands? Oh man, does that mean Lullaby is winning here? Lullaby? Wow, wow.
I told you.
Nicholas, how do you respond to this? What is your view? And then we'll come back and ask Leïla.
Yes, my view is quite simple. It's always very difficult to find a title. And I don't know, my question to Leïla would be this title, Chanson, douce, in French, which is really different from The Perfect Nanny, which is closer to Lullaby. Is it your title? Is it a title you have chosen since the beginning when you start writing the book? Or is it something which has grown in you? Or was it the choice of your publisher? Because it can be also.
No, I found it at the end. And Chanson douce, it's a very famous lullaby in France. And actually, it's the lullaby that I sing every night to my son. And one day I was looking for my title, and my editor was calling me 3 times a day. You have to find this title. And I was with my son, and I was singing, Une chanson douce, and I was like, oh, I have the title. It's Chanson douce. Because you know what? You always think that a lullaby is a soft song, a very nice song for little children, but it's not. When you sing a lullaby to someone, you want him to sleep. You hypnotize him. You manipulate him. When a child is asleep, you can do whatever you want with him. So I found that the lullaby is a dark song. It's not the gentle song that everyone thinks it is. And in a certain way, Louise, the nanny, she's singing a song to them. It's like, you know, the people who are making music to the snakes. It's hypnotizing. So I like this idea that when you read lullaby, you think, oh, it's going to be a nice song, but it's a very dark song.
What does it mean literally? The words of the lullaby, what do they mean?
The words of the lullaby or chanson douce? Chanson is song, and douce is a soft song.
I think, and again, this is my own prejudice, I think the Americans, who are more expert capitalists, have hit upon a better marketing idea by calling it The Perfect Nanny. It will sell more books, because when you come to a book, you don't want it to you don't want it to have a soporific effect on you. You don't want to pick up lullabies if you want to get into a book. And that's my opinion. You know what I'm saying?
And you know, when I spoke to my editor, he told me, my American editor, he told me something that I think is very relevant. He told me, you know, Americans are obsessed with perfection. Being a perfect mother, being a perfect nanny. And he said that's something that will speak to Americans because there is this obsession, this anxiety of being perfect. And I think that for Europeans, it's not the same. You know, in France, we like to say, I'm not a perfect mother and I don't care. In the United States, you know, the soccer mom who is absolutely perfect. It's not the same way of imagining yourself as a mother.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you is that in the same way as you are compassionate towards everyone, you also find dark corners in every soul. I mean, in the narrative. Are children also tainted? I mean, at one place when I read about Mila being cunning and how she's manipulative in some small way, I thought you were saying something about children too. Can you talk a little bit about your own experience or how you imagined writing about children?
You know, I think that the two most things, the things that are the most difficult to write are children and sex. Because it's full of cliché and it's full of cliché of caricature. I hate the idea that children are nice and innocent and that children don't understand the situation, the adult situation. I didn't want to write about those kind of children, you know, the very nice girl. I wanted to show that children have a very complex psychology, that they understand everything, that they can manipulate feelings, because of course she knows that the nanny is jealous of the mother and that the mother is jealous of the nanny. And when she's going to say to her mother, oh, leave me alone, I want my nanny, her mother is going to do whatever she wants. So I tried to build a very complex characters and not to be, a very innocent and very nice child, because I hate this.
In fact, there is an echo of it in one line when we read, she's so perfect, it sickens me. I can't now remember. I think it was about...
it's Paul who is feeling this for Louise. But you know, perfection is... it can make you very uncomfortable. Someone who is perfect, I think that in a certain way you can't trust him, because when it's too perfect, there's something hidden.
I must say, I was not able to detect many flaws in your books. It is near perfection for me. It's very well told. Let me ask you another question. At some place, Miriam says to her client, he has done some unspeakable deeds. He has killed 2 Sri Lankan, or he has participated in attacks on 2 Sri Lankan migrants in Paris. She says to him, she advises him to be truthful, but she also wants to be protective. She buys him a shirt, and she says, I want them to know that you too are a victim. Is that what you feel about the nanny also, who's accused of this unspeakable crime? And do you feel that about the rest of humanity?
You know, it's very difficult, this idea of victim. We have to recognize the fact that some persons are victims. For example, women. I fight a lot for rights of women. It's a fact, it's an objective fact that women are victims. Millions of women in the world are victims every day. But I don't think that victim is an identity. We can't define ourselves as victim forever from the beginning. You know what I mean? It's not our nature. It's a fact, but it's not our nature. So we shouldn't define ourselves as victim. And what I wanted to show in this part of the book is that Miriam is a lawyer. And she says this to this man, but at the same time, she's not conscious that she's living with someone who is also a victim. She doesn't see Louise. She doesn't see that the woman who is taking care of her children is a victim, but she sees it in another man who is totally a stranger. So I wanted to show that sometimes you don't know people who are living with you. You know, I think that actually intimacy is a way to... when you live with someone, you become blind. You don't see the person you are living with. I always laugh when people tell me, oh, you know, I live with him for 25 years, I know him very well. But it's not true. The more you live with someone and the less you know him, I think. Because intimacy makes us blind. We don't see people anymore. It's like a piece of furniture and it's just like this and you're not surprised. But I think that you can always be surprised by someone.
Those of you who are on Twitter might want to tweet, intimacy makes us blind. That's amazing. You know, there's an Indian writer. Do you read Indian writing by any chance, or is that a sin you have to overcome?
No, I have to say not so much. That's a shame, but I will do it now, I promise.
There's an Indian writer who's been a friend of the JLF, Akhil Sharma. He's written a book called The Obedient Father. It's a difficult book. It's a book about a man who rapes his granddaughter. And it is told in the voice of the man. So because it is told in the first person, perhaps because it is told in the first person, you often see the world from his position also. I'm saying all this because when you read the book, you will think maybe it's about sexual violence, which it is, or about a man in a corrupt part of Delhi, or this is about a corrupt nation. But when I asked him about it, he explained that his brother had an accident and became brain dead when they were children. And he had been brain dead till his recent death, 30 years or 25 years later. And Akhil said that his book about this father came from just understanding that he, when he thought about his brother, thought he was the victimizer. His brother had been a victim all his life. Understand? So what the book ostensibly seemed to be about was not what it was really about. It was something more. And I kept thinking of that when reading your book. It is ostensibly about a woman who has murdered the children. But it could be emerging from another experience of either feeling marginalized or something else, or shame, and I wanted to ask you about that.
I think it's a book about loneliness.
Loneliness.
Like
yes.
my first book, I think I'm obsessed by loneliness because as I was telling you, I think you never know someone. I think that you are always alone. I think that loneliness is our condition. We are always lonely. We meet people, we share a lot, we can laugh, we can love, but at the end, we are always lonely. And I think that nothing can make us not being lonely. So this is a book about loneliness. This is a book about someone who tries to belong. She wants to belong to something, to someone, she wants to have a place. And I love Virginia Woolf. Yeah. And I love this idea of having a room for a woman. And I think it's very important. She doesn't have a room. Not only because she's a woman, but she doesn't have a place that she owns. A place like where she can find intimacy, where she can find love, where she can have secrets. She has nothing. And this woman, she has always been a nanny. And I think what is very sad in the job of a nanny is that it's a life full of breakup. You have a lot of breakup. You raise a child, you love him, you feed him, you learn to him a lot of things, and one day the parents say to you, okay, thank you very much, now you have to go. And you do it again, and you redo it again, and you redo it again. And I had the feeling that Louise was like a cup, a little cup, and every day you're putting the cup on the table, and there is a lot of cracks inside the cup, but you don't see the cracks, and one day you put the cup, and the cup breaks.
I think we should not let loneliness grow among our audience also. We'll take some questions. Is that all right?
Of course.
Folks, would you like to ask Leïla some questions? The lady in the front row. Okay. Why don't I give you my mic?
Thank you. You said you were wanting to explore your fears as a mother with this. So obviously you went deep into that. And did that help? Or did it make you more frightened?
In a certain way, I think that I gave all my anxiety to my readers. Now it's yours. I'm not sure it helped, but it was very good to try to express all those things that women can't express because it's taboo. For example, I tried also to say that motherhood is, of course, something great, and you have a lot of very good experiences when you are a mother. But it's not always great, and you're not obliged when you're a mother to be always happy. People are telling you, when you're going to be a mother, you're going to see, it's so wonderful, you're never going to be lonely again, you will feel so much love. But it's not true. You can feel very lonely with your children. You can feel very bored. Sometimes you just want to go out of your house and for 5 minutes forget that you're a mother and become the woman you were before. And it's taboo to say this because people are judging you and telling you that if you think those kind of things, you are a bad mother. But I think that sometimes we should just stop judging because you don't say the same thing to a father. For example, when I come to India, I said to my mother, you know, I'm going to India for 1 week. And she said, wow, and who is staying with your children? I said, they are staying with their father. And she said, oh, they're alone. And I was like, no, they are with their father. When I'm leaving, my mother is always saying, your poor children. And when my husband is leaving, she's always saying, your poor husband, he travels too much, he works too much. So mothers have a very a big burden on their shoulders. We have a lot of guilt, and it's very difficult. So I wanted to say, what is it to be a mother? Behind, you know, this very nice image of being a mother is so nice and we are sweet. It's not always true.
Other question? In the third row. Oh, oh yeah. And then I'll pick up.
Hi. Okay. So I could see there's some really interesting themes from your book already about race, about gender, about class. But one thing that you talked about victim and victimhood. Now, how do you sort of create empathy for a character who is perhaps a victim of his or her own situations without succumbing to the cliches of victims or victimhood? How do you do that? Because a lot of times those are not really separable. So how do you do that is the question.
That's a very good question, and that's the question that I'm asking myself every day when I write. I think that what is important when you write a novel is that you have to create life. If it's lively, if there is life in your book, you can create empathy without cliché. A reader have to feel that someone is living, that something is beating into the book. Myself, as a reader, that's what I like in a book. You were speaking about Toni Morrison. When you read Toni Morrison, you can feel the characters, you can feel the flesh, you can feel the smells. And I think that what's the most important when you write a book, it's life. It has to be lively. And then you can do whatever you want if you manage to put life in your book.
The lady here in the front row.
Hello. Yeah. So I have two questions. First, about the working mother's guilt, as you were talking just now. So how do you shoo away? Because in countries like India, and there is so much guilt attached to working mothers. So how to shoo away the guilt? How do you shoo away the guilt? Working mother's guilt.
How do you what?
Shoo away. Shoo away.
By expressing it and by telling you, I'm not ashamed of telling you this. I'm not ashamed of telling you that I don't want to play Lego with my son because I hate Lego. And I'm not ashamed of telling you that sometimes I just want to have a very nice drink with my friends and not staying during all night with my children. I think that we women are the one who can liberate and emancipate ourselves. And telling just men, you know what, tonight you're staying with the children and you're going to share the guilt with me because I don't want to take everything. You have to share it with me. And I think it's very important to, as a women, to look at fathers and to help also men to become fathers. You know, when I won my prize, I had a lot of work and I had to travel a lot. And my husband, he quitted his job. And he said, okay, I'm going to stay home for 2 years so you can do whatever you want and you can travel and do everything. And at the beginning, he was very anxious. But 6 months ago, he told me, you know what, you made me the most extraordinary gift that someone could give me. You made me a father, because now I'm a father. And I spend all my time with my children, and I know what it is to be a father. So I think that the best way to get rid of this guilt is to share it with the fathers and to help them being father, because it's wonderful to be two and not just the mother and...
Excellent. Wow. All right. There's the lady in the front row here.
Hello. My name is Melissa. I'm from Malaysia. I just wanted to ask you, you said just now that even monsters have stories. And I was wondering, how do you get inside the mind of a monster, right from his perspective or her perspective, and then get out of it?
I could tell you that I am a monster myself, but I don't know. But you never look like a monster. What is the face of a monster? You know, I think that when you're a novelist, you have to feel empathy for, in a certain way, for everyone. And I feel empathy and I feel fascination also. I read a lot about monsters, about killers, about people that you can't understand, because I want to understand. I want to know what life they had, what would their childhood look like. I think it's fascinating, and all the novelists from all over the world have always written about those kind of characters. Look at Dostoevsky, for example. I'm absolutely fascinated by Dostoevsky. How can a writer, how can a man understand so deeply evil, can understand the character of Raskolnikov, for example, is an extraordinary character. And you have also to keep in mind that when you write, there is a sort of energy that comes from the writing itself. And the more you write, and the more your character begins to live. And sometimes you don't even know why you are writing this thing. It's always weird when you say, this is the character who told me to write this. People always look at you, okay. But that's true. The characters sometimes tell you things. You know, there's a story that I love. Tolstoy, when he wrote Anna Karenine, he received a lot of money from his editor. And he didn't give the manuscript. He was very late. And one day the editor decided to go to Tolstoy's house. And he was mad. He was furious. And he said to Tolstoy, now you give me the money back or you give me the manuscript, but I won't wait for this Anna Karenine. I'm fed up with this manuscript. And Tolstoy looked at him and he said, it's not my fault. Anna left and I'm waiting for her. And the editor was furious, but it's true. And I completely understand what he wanted to say. Sometimes your character is just here and he tells you what to write. This is the magic of literature. It seems weird, but it's true.
There was a hand towards the back, and I didn't want that person to be ignored. Is that person still interested in asking a question? He or she? No? All right. Then perhaps right there.
Hi, Leïla. I'm Naina. I'm a student from Delhi, and I just got myself a copy of Lullaby. My question arises from one of the remarks that you made about women being able to claim their bodies again, right? And I'm almost compelled to think of a verse from Han Kang's The Vegetarian, when she talks about how any part of her body can cause violence, but it's her breasts that don't cause violence, and yet they seem to offend everybody the most. And we live at a time where the female body is a topic of a lot of contention, and it's constantly sexualized, it's constantly looked from a certain kind of angle. And my question is, how do you choose between this sort of binary of either you look at the breast as, say, from a maternal perspective or sexualize it? So how do you explore the female body when such a binary exists?
I think that we should even more explore actually the body of women, and we should, you know, for very, very, very long time, women couldn't write, and women couldn't be published. And we only had one point of view. It was the point of view of male. And for a very long time, a woman who wanted to write a novel or to write an essay, she had to change her name for a male name. And that's why I think that the most important thing for us women is to speak out, to stop being silent, because the best weapon of patriarchy is silence, is making us silent and telling us that it's a shame to speak, that it's a shame to express ourselves. When we express ourselves, we can also become sisters, we can build a sort of sorority, we can build a collectivity. And one of the other weapons of patriarchy was to isolate women from each other, because when you don't speak, you can't get together. So I think that the best way to desexualize the body of women, to emancipate ourselves, is first of all to express, to break the silence, to say who we are, and to say, you know what, I don't want to be ashamed, because I don't think it's a shame.
The shame is the way you are looking at me. It's not my body, it's the way you are looking at this body. So I think that first thing is to break the silence everywhere.
Thank you. There are about 5 minutes left, so if there are other questions, while we are, can I ask you a quick thing while the mic is being transported? Zadie Smith was at a dinner, and she was pregnant, and a male writer sitting across from her said, "Oh, you're pregnant. Don't you feel bad that you won't be able to write a book?" And she remarked that it was only men who expressed such fears. And I wanted to ask you about what it meant. Did becoming a mother hinder, help in your writing, or give shape to your writing? Could you talk a little bit about that?
But you know, a lot of women writers decided not to become mothers because they thought that they couldn't be a mother and a writer. For example, Simone de Beauvoir, Virginia Woolf, they were very afraid that being a mother was going to kill the inspiration. You know, writing is a struggle. There is we were speaking of this earlier, there is never a good time for writing. You have always to fight to find a moment just for you to write. So of course, when there's 2 children behind the door saying, "Mommy, what are you doing?" Of course it's difficult. But you have to fight for your room. And this room is mine, and no one is going into this room, and this door is closed until 5, and no one is coming into this. And it's very important for women to fight for this intimacy. You know, in Morocco, when I did this book, Sex and Lies, I had a lot of discussion with women. And many women who came from very poor backgrounds, they told me, you know what is difficult? I'm never alone. Because I was raised in a home with my sisters and my brothers and my mothers and my aunts. And now I'm living with my parents. I don't have a place where I can dream, where I can be alone, where I can go with a boyfriend, and have just tenderness. I think that loneliness is very important for emancipate ourselves.
Thank you.
Hi, Leïla, I'm Nishta. My question is about misappropriation. It's become one of the ugliest charges in the world of literature today. How far do you think, as a writer, can you legitimately go when you're writing about experiences that you do not own or have not experienced? So, for example, if you're a French-Moroccan writer, do you think you have any legitimacy to write about, say, a South Asian housewife or a Nigerian farmer? How far do you think you can legitimately go? Thank you.
That's a very good question. Very good questions today.
Very good audience in JLF.
Very good. You know, when I write, when I'm in front of my table, I'm not a woman, I'm not a Moroccan, I'm not a Muslim, I am whatever I want. Sometimes I'm a man, sometimes I'm an old Russian man writing in the 19th century. That's why I like literature, because it's a space where I can invent myself. I can be whoever I want to be. And I think that's the aim of life, and that's what I'm looking for in my life and what I'm trying to teach to my children. Try to invent yourself, try to invent your destiny. And I don't think that literature is a place of legitimacy. Of course, it's very important that a Moroccan can write about a Chinese woman, and a Chinese can write about an American, because at the end, we are all human beings. And melancholy has no nationality. Despair has no nationality. Love has no nationality. And that's why literature is very important. Why me, a Moroccan, I am here today in Jaipur speaking with you about a novel. Because literature is a place of universal. There is no border, there is no passport, there is no visa for literature. Everyone can understand a novel.
Thank you. Well, that's a perfect note to end on. I want to thank Leïla Slimani for coming all the way to Jaipur.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And thank you, Nicolas Idier. Thank you very much.
घर को एकदम चकाचक चमका के रखते हैं हम, और घर के बाहर आसपास की 10 गज। ये भी तो मेरा ही घर है, ये इधर और ये इधर।
A big round of applause for really the bold and beautiful, I would say, Leïla. bold and beautiful Leïla. It was so fascinating to listen to her and to Amitava for lovely question and the lovely audience. And our next session, with no gap in between, we have a book launch. So give us just 2 minutes. The next session, the people are here, the panelists, and we will be up on stage in no time. So that's the book launch, India's Heritage of Gharana Music, Pandits of Gwalior, by Meeta Pandit. She will be in conversation with Alka Pandey, and Vishal Bhardwaj will be launching the book.